I thought the envelope was another overdue bill, the kind that always came late, stamped in red, heavy with the same quiet shame I'd learned to carry without complaint. I stood in our narrow kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, the hum of the old refrigerator filling the silence while rain tapped gently against the window. My husband was still asleep, or at least I thought he was. The envelope had no return address. Thick paper, heavy, not the kind creditors use. I turned it over once, twice, then slid my finger under the seal. And that's when my world tilted. Inside was a single sheet of paper, cream-colored, crisp, the kind you frame, not fold. At the top, an emblem, gold, subtle, powerful. Below it, a number. Not a bill, a balance. So many zeros my eyes refused to understand it at first. I felt my knees weaken. Behind me, the floor creaked. Who sent that? My husband asked softly. I turned. He stood there in the doorway, hair messy, wearing the same faded t-shirt he'd owned since before we met. The man who drove a dented car. The man who counted grocery items twice before checkout. The man who told me, next year will be better. My voice shook. Why does this say 7 figures? He didn't answer. He just closed the door behind him. And in that silence, heavy, deliberate, final, I realized something terrifying. I didn't actually know the man I married. And whatever he was about to tell me was going to change everything. I used to think love was measured in small things. The way Daniel fixed the leaky faucet without complaining. The way he folded laundry with almost military precision. The way he never raised his voice, even when the world seemed determined to test him. We lived in a narrow 2-bedroom apartment above a closed-down bakery. The stairs always smelled faintly of yeast and dust. In winter, the radiator clicked like it was arguing with itself. In summer, the air conditioner worked only if you spoke kindly to it. Daniel said he liked it that way. Quiet places make honest people, he once told me. I believed him. Every morning he left before sunrise, wearing the same faded gray jacket. The cuffs frayed just enough to show years of use. He worked as a consultant, or at least that's what he said. He never specified who for. Nothing fancy, he'd say with a shrug. Pays the bills, mostly. And I never pushed, because pushing costs energy. And energy was something we didn't always have. Money was tight, not desperate, but constantly hovering on the edge. The kind of tight where you memorize prices at the grocery store, where you know which brands go on sale and which don't, where you quietly calculate totals in your head before you reach the register. Daniel always insisted on splitting everything evenly, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. I don't want you carrying more than me, he'd say, sliding half the rent across the table in carefully stacked bills. Sometimes I'd notice the money was crisp, but I told myself not to overthink it. People lie all the time, right? Small lies, harmless ones. I worked as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. Long shifts, exhausted feet, the kind of job where you come home carrying other people's pain in your chest. Daniel would be waiting, dinner already made, lights dimmed, soft music playing from an old speaker he'd fixed himself. How was today? He'd ask. And he actually listened. When my mother got sick, Daniel didn't hesitate. He drove me 3 hours every weekend to see her, even though gas money was tight. When my car broke down, he sold his motorcycle without telling me. I found out weeks later. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. He smiled softly. Didn't seem important. That was Daniel, always putting himself second, always choosing quiet sacrifice. Which is why the truth, when it finally cracked through my life, felt like a betrayal of reality itself. It happened on a Tuesday, nothing dramatic, no thunder, no music swelling, just a phone call. I was at work, halfway through a double shift, when the hospital administrator pulled me aside. There's a man here asking for you, she said, lowering her voice. Says it's urgent. I assumed it was Daniel. The man standing there didn't belong in my world. He wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than our monthly rent. His shoes reflected the fluorescent lights like mirrors. His watch, understated, elegant, screamed quiet money. He smiled politely, Mrs. Carter. he asked. Yes. My name is Richard Hale. I represent Carter Holdings. My stomach tightened. I think you have the wrong person. He shook his head gently. No, I'm here because of your husband. For a moment, I felt relieved. Maybe Daniel had finally found a better job. Maybe this was good news. Then Richard said the sentence that tilted the ground beneath my feet. We've been trying to reach Mr. Carter for weeks. He missed a board meeting this morning. I stared at him, bored. Meeting? Richard's smile faltered. Just slightly, I see, he said slowly. He hasn't told you. Told me what? My pulse thudded in my ears. Told me what? I repeated. Richard hesitated, looked around, lowered his voice. Your husband is the majority shareholder and acting executive of Carter Holdings. The words meant nothing at first. They slid off my brain like water. I'm sorry, I said, laughing nervously. You must be confusing him with someone else. My husband works as a consultant. Richard didn't laugh. Ma'am, he said carefully. Carter Holdings is a private investment firm valued at approximately $120 million. The room spun. I reached for the edge of the desk to steady myself. That's not possible, I whispered. We can barely afford groceries some weeks. Richard's expression softened, not with pity, but with something like respect. He lives very differently than most people in his position, he said. I left work early that day. Didn't tell my supervisor why. Didn't call Daniel. I drove home on autopilot, my thoughts spiraling. Millionaire, the word echoed. Hollow and unreal. I unlocked our apartment door and stepped into the familiar space. The worn couch, the thrift store bookshelf, the chipped coffee mugs, nothing had changed. And yet everything had. I went to the bedroom, the closet. I pushed aside Daniel's jackets and found a small locked drawer I'd never noticed before. My hands shook as I tried to open it. Locked, of course. That night, Daniel came home late, later than usual. He froze when he saw me sitting at the kitchen table. Not angry, not scared, just caught. How was work? He asked quietly. I slid my phone across the table. On the screen, an article. Carter Holdings, the quiet giant behind emerging markets. Below it, a photo. A younger Daniel, clean-cut, confident, standing in a glass boardroom. My chest burned. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. He sat down slowly. I wanted a normal life, he said. And I wanted you to love me without this. My voice cracked. You mean the truth? Maybe the radiator finally exploded. Maybe the landlord had raised the rent again. But when I stepped into the waiting area, he looked at me then, really looked at me. And for the first time since I'd known him, I saw fear in his eyes. I was afraid, he admitted. Of what? That if you knew, he said softly, you'd never know if you loved me, or the life I could give you. Silence filled the apartment. The radiator clicked. The city hummed outside. I thought my husband was broke, I said quietly. Daniel nodded. I know. And you let me struggle, I continued. You let me worry. You let me think we were barely surviving. I never let you suffer, he said firmly. I made sure we were safe. But you lied. Yes. The word hung between us like a broken promise. I stood up. I need air, I said. Daniel didn't stop me. As I stepped into the night, one truth settled heavy in my chest. I didn't just discover my husband was a millionaire. I discovered I didn't know the man I married. And the worst part, I wasn't sure whether I was angry or terrified of how much I still loved him. The first crack didn't come with drama. It came with silence. Ethan used to complain about money, not loudly, just in passing. The gas bill, the rising rent, the way his shoes wore out faster than they should. It was the kind of quiet worry couples share when they're building something together from nothing. But now he didn't. The bills still came. I still paid most of them. But Ethan stopped looking at them. At first, I thought he was tired, or proud, or maybe just relieved that I'd taken control of the budgeting. Then one evening, I noticed something small. He left his phone on the kitchen counter. That never happened. Ethan guarded his phone the way broke men guard dignity, carefully, almost unconsciously. But this time, It buzzed while he was in the shower. A notification lit up the screen. Transfer complete. No sender name. No emoji. Just a number. I didn't touch it. I didn't open it. I didn't need to, because the amount, even blurred, was more than our monthly rent. When Ethan came out, toweled around his shoulders, humming softly, I tried to sound casual. Did you get paid early? He paused, just for half a second. No, he said. Why? I shrugged. Your phone buzzed. Oh, he said, smiling too quickly. Probably spam. Spam? I nodded, but something inside me shifted. The life he lived when I wasn't looking. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing patterns. Ethan left earlier in the mornings, came home later at night, said he was helping a friend or doing side work, but he never came home dirty. No grease on his hands, no sweat on his shirt, no exhaustion in his eyes. Instead, he came home calm, grounded, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. One night, while folding laundry, I found something in his jacket pocket. A valet ticket from a hotel I'd only ever seen in movies. My hands shook as I turned it over. No date, no room number, just a logo embossed, gold. When I asked him about it, he didn't deny it. He laughed. Found that on the street, he said. Probably fell out of someone else's pocket. I laughed too, because sometimes pretending is easier than confronting the truth you're not ready to hear. The day everything broke open, the day I found out wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no confrontation, just coincidence. My car broke down on the edge of downtown, overheated, smoke rising from the hood like a warning. I called Ethan, no answer. Then I remembered something strange he'd said weeks ago. If anything ever happens, go to Harbor Tower. At the time, I thought it was a joke. Standing there now, stranded, I ordered a ride. 20 minutes later, I stood in front of a glass building that reached into the clouds. Harbor Tower. The doorman looked at me, really looked, then stepped aside without asking my name. Top floor, he said gently. The elevator was silent, too quiet. When the doors opened, I stepped into a world I didn't recognize. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a city laid out beneath my feet like a map. And there, in the center of it all, stood my husband, Ethan, in a tailored suit, speaking calmly to a room full of men who listened when he spoke. He turned, saw me, and in that moment the mask fell, not because he was exposed, but because he was finally seen. The doubt didn't arrive loudly. It slipped in quietly, the way truth often does. Maya noticed it on a Tuesday morning. Ethan had already left for work, as usual, before sunrise. His side of the bed was cold. The apartment felt too quiet, filled only with the hum of the refrigerator and the faint noise of traffic outside. Maya stood in the kitchen, holding the grocery list she'd written the night before. Milk, rice, eggs, she sighed. They were always counting, always choosing, always saying maybe next month. That was when she saw it, an envelope on the counter, cream, thick paper, no return address. Her name was written on it in elegant, unfamiliar handwriting. Not Eve. Her stomach tightened. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single card. Your payment has been processed successfully. No amount listed. No explanation. Just a logo she didn't recognize. Sleek, minimal, expensive. Maya read it 3 times. Then she laughed under her breath. Probably junk mail, she told herself. But the feeling didn't leave. The small things that didn't add up. Over the next few days, Maya began noticing details she had ignored before. Ethan never complained about money. Not really. He agreed to icily when she suggested skipping dinners out. He shrugged when appliances broke. He always said, "We'll manage." But now she wondered, was it patience or practice? One evening, while folding laundry, Maya found something in Ethan's jacket pocket. A valet ticket from a hotel downtown, a 5-star hotel. She stared at it, heart pounding. Ethan had told her he worked late that night, helping a friend move. She placed the ticket back carefully, said nothing, but the seed was planted. The call that changed everything. 3 nights later, Ethan came home later than usual. He looked exhausted, but not the kind of tired Maya knew. This was different. His phone rang while he was washing his hands. He didn't see Maya standing in the hallway. "Yes," he said quietly. "I understand." Pause. "No, I told you. Keep it discreet." Another pause. "I don't want her involved." Maya's breath caught. "Her?" He turned and froze when he saw her. For a split second, something flashed across his face. Fear? Real fear? "Who was that?" Maya asked. Ethan forced a smile. "Just work." But his voice wasn't steady. That night, Maya didn't sleep. She lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing. And for the first time since they met, she wondered, who did I marry? A door left unlocked. The next afternoon, Maya did something she never thought she would. She followed him, not dramatically, not like in movies. She waited 10 minutes after he left. Then she grabbed her coat and walked. She kept her distance as Ethan boarded a train heading downtown. He didn't go to an office building. He didn't go to a warehouse. He went to a private parking garage. A guard nodded and lifted the gate. Ethan drove out moments later, not in their old sedan, but in a black luxury car. Maya's knees nearly gave out. She stood there, frozen. The truth wasn't whispering anymore. It was screaming. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No logo, no return address, heavy paper. I found it tucked between grocery coupons and electricity bills, the kind of mail my husband always sorted without comment. Except this time, he hadn't. Inside was a single card. Black, thick, elegant, embossed in gold. Invitation, Hawthorne Private Equity Annual Gala. My hands went cold. The name struck something deep in my memory. Hawthorne. I had heard it before, whispered on financial news. Mentioned in articles I barely skimmed while folding laundry. A firm known for buying failing companies and turning them into giants. At the bottom of the card was a line that made my breath stop. "We look forward to welcoming Mr. Daniel Hawthorne and guest." Guest. Not employee. Not contractor. Mr. Hawthorne. My husband. Denial? That evening, Daniel came home late. Same worn jacket. Same scuffed shoes. Same tired smile. "How was your day?" he asked, setting his lunch bag down like always. I held up the invitation. "What's this?" For the first time in our marriage, he froze. Not confusion. Recognition. He stared at the card for a long moment, then slowly sat down. "I was hoping it wouldn't come yet," he said quietly. The room felt smaller. "Daniel," I whispered, "why is your name on this?" He rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit I'd only seen once before. "At our wedding? I didn't want you to know like this." "Know what?" Silence stretched. Finally, he said it. "I own Hawthorne." The words landed wrong, like they didn't belong in our house with peeling paint and secondhand furniture. "You own it?" I repeated. He nodded. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was impossible. Memory rewritten. Everything rushed back at once. The nights he came home exhausted but never complained. The times he insisted we didn't need more, even when I cried over bills. The way he flinched when I suggested applying for assistance. The calm, the control, the quiet restraint. "How long?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "Since before we met." The room spun. "So our entire marriage." He swallowed. "I didn't lie about who I am," he said. "I lied about what I have." That somehow hurt more. Why he hid it? Daniel finally looked at me, really looked. "My father was rich," he said, "and cruel." I had never heard him speak about his family. He taught me that money gives you the power to control people. I watched it destroy everything it touched. His voice cracked. I wanted to know someone loved me without it. The truth settled heavy between us. "So this house, this life, I chose it," he said. "With you, I should have felt honored. Instead, I felt small and angry and suddenly unsure who I was married to." A question that changed everything. That night, lying beside him in the dark, I asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you trust me?" He turned toward me instantly. "Yes." "Then why didn't you let me trust you?" He had no answer, only silence. And in that silence, something fragile cracked open, not broken yet, but close. The first sign came quietly, too quietly. It was a Tuesday morning when Clara noticed the envelope. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't sealed. It simply didn't belong. Their apartment mailbox usually held grocery flyers, overdue notices, or nothing at all. But this envelope was thick, heavy cream-colored paper with an embossed logo. Clara didn't recognize. She almost put it back. Almost. Then she saw the name. Daniel Harper. Her husband? But the address wasn't theirs. Clara's stomach tightened. She carried it upstairs like it might explode in her hands. A name that didn't fit the life. Daniel was in the kitchen, tying his worn shoes. "Morning," he said softly, reaching for his coffee thermos, the dented one he'd used for years. "Morning," Clara replied, watching him closely. She held up the envelope. "Did you change jobs?" Daniel froze. Just for a fraction of a second. Barely noticeable. But Clara saw it. "No," he said. "Why?" She handed it to him. Daniel stared at the logo. Then he smiled. Too quickly. "Oh, that," he said lightly. "Probably a mistake. Happens sometimes." He slid it into his jacket pocket without opening it. No curiosity. No confusion. That bothered her more than anything. Little things Clara couldn't unsee. From that day on, Clara started noticing details she'd ignored before. Daniel never complained about money. Not really. He always said, "We'll manage." But somehow, they always did. The rent was paid on time. The lights never shut off. Unexpected bills disappeared. When Clara asked how, Daniel shrugged. Extra shifts, side work. But she'd never seen him exhausted. Never smelled grease or sweat when he came home. In his hands, they were always clean. Too clean? A slip of the mask. The second crack came a week later. Clara's car broke down in the rain. She called Daniel, panicked, standing alone on the shoulder of the road. "I'm stuck," she said. "I don't know what to do." "I'll handle it," Daniel replied calmly. Too calmly. Within 20 minutes, a black luxury SUV pulled up. Not a tow truck. A man in a tailored coat stepped out, holding an umbrella. "Mrs. Harper?" he asked politely. Clara blinked yes. "I'm here on behalf of your husband." Her phone buzzed. "Daniel, you're safe now." The man opened the passenger door for her. Inside, leather seats, soft lighting, silence. This wasn't normal. This wasn't broke. The question that hung between them. That night, Clara waited. Daniel came home late. No jacket, no umbrella. No explanation. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Who was that man?" she asked. Daniel stopped. The room felt suddenly small. "I told you," he said carefully. "Side work." Clara's voice shook. "That wasn't side work, Daniel. That was, well." Silence stretched between them. For the first time since she'd known him, Daniel didn't smile. "I'm tired," he said. "We'll talk later." But Clara knew. Later had already arrived. The morning after the truth. The house felt different the next morning. Not bigger. Not richer. Quieter. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen window as I stood at the sink, staring at a mug I hadn't touched. The word millionaire still felt unreal, like it belonged to another woman's life, not mine. Ethan entered quietly, dressed the same as always. No designer clothes, no watch. Just jeans, a plain shirt, and that calm expression I'd loved long before I knew anything else. "I made coffee," he said softly. I nodded but didn't turn around. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why live like we had nothing?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He pulled out a chair and sat down. "Because I was afraid," he said. "That stopped me." "Afraid of what?" "Of being loved for the wrong reasons," he replied. "Of becoming someone I didn't recognize. Of losing you. Before I ever had you." I turned then, and for the first time, I didn't see secrets. I saw fear. The life he chose. Ethan told me everything. How the money came from a company he'd built in his 20s and sold quietly. How he'd watched people change overnight when they learned about it. How he'd decided, after one ugly betrayal, to live simply, to see who would stay when there was nothing to gain. I didn't plan to fall in love, he said. But when I did, I panicked. My voice cracked. You didn't trust me. I didn't trust myself, he answered. I was scared wealth would ruin the one good thing I had. We sat there in silence. Then I reached for his hand. You should have told me, I said. But I understand why you didn't. Tears welled in his eyes, the kind I'd never seen before. I was going to, he whispered. I just didn't know how. What changed and what didn't. Our life didn't suddenly turn into luxury. We didn't move, didn't upgrade everything, didn't start showing off. We stayed, but something shifted inside us. There was honesty now, transparency, trust rebuilt slowly, carefully, like something fragile that mattered too much to rush. Ethan funded a local shelter quietly, paid off medical bills for people he'd never meet, invested in small businesses run by families just trying to survive. No announcements, no plaques, just impact. And me. I stopped measuring love by struggle alone. I learned that humility can exist alongside abundance, and that sometimes the greatest wealth is choosing restraint. The final truth. One evening, months later, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. I don't need the money, I told him. I need the truth. He nodded. And you have it. Always. I leaned my head on his shoulder. The world passed by quietly, and I realized something then, something I'd never forget. He wasn't pretending to be broke. He was choosing to be grounded. Final moral echo. Sometimes the biggest secrets aren't about money. They're about fear, trust, and the courage it takes to be seen fully. Because real wealth isn't what you hide. It's what you protect and who you choose to share it with. The end.